has the true crime kind of phenomenon, for lack of a better word right at the moment, has that changed the courtroom in any way?
So I think the proliferation of anyone with a microphone can have a podcast, which we're guilty of, right? We had no media training. We didn't seek to become, in the media world. Because of that, there's a lot of noise out there from people, especially in the crime world, who actually don't know much about the legal system, but they say their opinions as if it is in fact. And so I think because there are so many voices out there that have a lot of misinformation, and it may not even be malicious, it may just be because they have no idea, but they're speaking seemingly from a place of authority, that the jury pool or the general public who used to, we used to have a common language in what civics meant, what the reasonable person standard meant, what reasonable doubt meant. We no longer have that because we all become siloed and listen to the channels that we want to, that become an echo chamber of, well, I just believe in all conspiracies, so I'm only going to listen to YouTube channels or podcasts that talk about police conspiracies, or you pick your conspiracy. There's going to be a channel or a Reddit, thread for you. And I think because of that, we have lost some of that ability. This is writ large. This is how we've seen media play out in general, news media, any type of media. We become siloed, which obviously then affects the courtroom to some extent, because if you go to jury trial, your jury is pulled from a jury of your peers.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill, and I'm Honey Boo Boo. This is Writers Drinking Whiskey, and we are hosting The Prosecutors. I don't know the tune. I was like, I can't do it right now. It was better in my head.
Like Ghostbusters, and I'm here for it.
Exactly. Better.
Very good. So, Alice, Brett, thanks so much for joining the show, coming to the bar here, virtual as it is for you guys. But I'm really excited to do this. Let me give you the tasting notes version of an introduction, because I'm very theme oriented. So I can't say the Cliff Notes version. It has to be the tasting notes version. So let me get it here. And I got these mostly from your website, so you guys can, add anything I might have forgot. But the devilish Alice was a native Texan, mean fiddle player, hence the devilish, because I believe all fiddle players learn this at the crossroads. A former dancer, a grad of Yale Law School, and you now call the courtroom your stage. Then we have the Lovecraftian Brett. You are a Southern gentleman, and I left this because it kind of sounded like a dating website, but who loves abandoned buildings and haunted beaches, as well as something called the Cholulu plushie, which I'm not sure. You'll have to explain what that is. Yeah. Sure. But then you're also a writer in your own right. I wanted to mention that since we're writers drinking whiskey. And so you write fiction. I think there were some true ghost stories as well. You're nominated for a couple of Bram Stoker awards, which is really awesome. And a couple of the books were That Which Should Not Be, He Who Walks in Shadows, and there's also the story The Fiddler is the Devil's Instrument, which wraps up this whole, superlatives that I was trying to heap upon the two of you. Yeah, so very cool. And then, of course, I should actually mention for anyone that doesn't know, and if you don't know, I'm going to send you a strongly worded letter, which for younger people, that's an email that you would physically send out. And then just the two podcasts you guys host is The Prosecutors and Legal Briefs.
That's right. Yeah, we're very busy people.
Having us.
Very good. Thanks so much for that. So the biggest question, the question that really made me start this whole entire show here is, what are we drinking?
Well, we're drinking Writer's Tears tonight, which is an Irish whiskey, which you were kind enough to send an entire bottle to me. I was deeply moved by that. Really,
well, the way I looked into a shot of it, but it wasn't practical to get that to you.
The first place that I ever had this was in Glasgow. Not in Glasgow. Where was I? Galway. I'm in Galway in Ireland at a little Irish pub. I saw the bottle Writer's Tears and I thought I have to try that. So really sort of bringing me back to my Irish roots. And I got to tell you, I'm just looking behind you, everything you have behind you is so awesome. I love your bar. Is that like an absinthe water?
That is. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
good spot on that one.
Yeah. That's great. Anyway, very happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us. This is awesome. My kind of podcast.
This is absolutely that's kind of podcast, but I just have to jump in. For those of you who haven't heard our podcast, you may not know that Brett likes to keep all good things for himself. So he kept the bottle and didn't give it to me, which I'm not holding against this podcast. I still showed up despite him keeping the bourbon to himself. But let me say, I spent a summer working in Eritrea in law school. And you may not know this, or maybe you do. There's not much to do in Eritrea or Eritrea, depending on how you pronounce it. There are no nightclubs. In fact, there were power grid outages all the time. So there was no electricity. So what did we do? We drank about a bottle of bourbon a day for the entire summer. So I'd like to think that I've drank think for the rest of my life.
I didn't know it worked that way. I just keep adding to the accumulation here. I think my wife said we were on vacation for about 10 days 2 weeks ago. And I think she was like, I think you drank enough for the year. And I was like, there's no amount, I don't keep track, that's for suckers. So very cool. So I like to get us started here by kind of getting to know everyone that comes on. So, and since I have two of you, I thought what would be really fun here is if maybe you both could, take some time, kind of tell us, you give us the tasting notes version of like your biography kind of leading up to where you guys met. And then when you guys met, maybe we could kind of intertwine them there and lead up to today.
Before we do that, is that Bigfoot behind you too? Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Is that Bigfoot? Is that Mothman?
There's Bigfoot. There's a Mothman. Yeah, if I can get my finger right. I have a Wolfman right here, the Wolf of Bray Road.
Wow. And your research.
Man, I need to hire your decorator. Anyway,
you'd be hiring me, and I come cheap though because I am a writer. So you pay me pennies, I'll be perfectly happy. But
well, you've hit a lot of the high notes. I guess I'm from Alabama originally. You probably can tell from the way I talk. Grew up in Alabama, just outside of Birmingham. Went to the University of Alabama for undergrad, and then went to Harvard for law school, which was a very different experience than what I was used to in Walker County, Alabama. And then after that, you went to a big law firm in DC for a little while, decided that wasn't really for me. So I went to clerk for a couple federal judges, and then eventually ended up in a state attorney general's office, and then at the Department of Justice. And when I was at the Department of Justice, that's where I met Alice. And Alice and I worked together in DC for a little while. And then we both ended up totally randomly moving back to Alabama for me, to Alabama for the first time for Alice, working together in a prosecutor's office. And, at some point, I was a big true crime fan. I would always tell Alice all these stories about true crime, and we'd go get coffee or whatnot. And we decided, hey, we should try a podcast, and the rest is history.
Very cool. Very cool. You want to give us your version, Alice? Is it very much different? Like,
I don't know. Are we going to have a fight on this podcast? Because, I never heard his version. So no, a lot of that is the same. And, it's funny. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but my husband's job is what brought us to Alabama. So truly,
okay.
Tongue in cheek, we both really did end up in Alabama. So I grew up in Texas. I'm a Texan. And as you already said, I went to law school at Yale. Honestly, never thought that I would practice law. My parents were immigrants. I didn't really know lawyers. I really just went to law school because it was kind of the next thing. And I figured I would do something else after that. I actually wanted to get a PhD.
Sure.
I thought that was really fun to get to write, math proofs all day. That life didn't work out, mostly because it was the financial crisis of 2008 and all the PhD programs dried up. And this should tell you something about lawyers. There were a lot of law school openings. So I applied to law school, clerked for a couple judges back in my home state of Texas, and then joined the Department of Justice through the Attorney General's Honors Program, which was an awesome way to start out practicing the law. I got to travel all over the country on behalf of the United States for about a decade. And then when I moved to Alabama, became a prosecutor, shared a wall with Brett. We spent so much time talking about our cases. We tried cases together. We talked about, Mothman and Bigfoot, really.
Very good.
What are you talking about? This is a lot of our relationship is me saying, what do you know? What more do you know? Tell me more. So he talked me into starting a podcast. I had no intention of starting a podcast, but I don't know, we had like lots of little kids running around and no sleep. And we had a bunch of cases we needed to try. We thought might as well spend even more time together talking. And we
Sure.
did. It was like the greatest unexpected adventure of our lives. I will definitely say that. It's been 5 years now, and I cannot believe we've been doing this for 5 years. We get to meet cool people like you. It's opened up, just paths in our profession that the normal law path would never lead to. And both of us still practice law full time in addition to doing the podcast, which is what I think makes the podcast so fun. It truly is one of the most time consuming hobbies we do because we love it.
Sure, sure. It's funny. I tell people about this show. I'm like, it's a labor of fun, but it's also a labor of incredible amounts of work to put it all together and do everything. Especially I'm a one man gang, so it catches up to you. So thanks for that. So we did skip over though, because I wanted to talk about the fiddling and the dancing. Like, where does that fit into your story there?
Alice has done everything.
I haven't done everything, but I grew up playing the violin. But when I went to college, I went to a small liberal arts college in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And like I showed up, playing classical violin my whole life. By the way, the violin and the fiddle are the same instrument. You play them differently, kind of like jazz piano and classical piano, same instrument, different way of playing it. And I show up into the Blue Ridge Mountains. And when I say small town, I'm talking 8,000 people on a good day, right? Coffee shop. And there are these like, not an exaggeration, 95-year-old band. They've been playing together for about years, and we got together
Sure.
every morning at 6 a.m. at the coffee shop and just, riffed and banged out the most amazing bluegrass you've ever heard in your life. And one of them saw me kind of tapping my foot to me. He's like, "Do you play?" And I was like, "Not that."
Sure.
Do you play the fiddle? And I said, "I play the violin." He goes, "Then I'll teach you." And so he taught me, and I played bluegrass with them around, the Blue Ridge Mountains at different like bluegrass festivals for all of college. And it was awesome. It was so fun. I played with people with like braided beards down to the floor. Like it up when we went to festivals because it would get stuck in the mud, and it was so fun. So that's where the fiddling fit in. I don't get to nearly as much now, obviously, but I love that vignette in my life because it's an adventure. I could have very well just said, nah, kind of like the podcast. I could have said, nah, that's not my thing. I don't know how to do it. I'll probably look foolish. And I probably did for, the first several times that I did it. But by saying yes, it ended up being like such a cool adventure. And dance is like I loved it my whole life. I thought I wanted to be a professional dancer, did, do lots of shows off Broadway, that sort of thing. And realistically, if you're a lawyer, you're risk averse by nature. You know that can't be. For me, I was not good enough for that to like be able to feed not even a family, myself. So I decided I'd practice some dance when I could.
Yeah, very, very cool. Thank you for that. I always just imagined like there was some crossroads that you had gone to, and that's where the fiddling came from. And the Faustian bargain was then you become a lawyer. Like he's like, no, I'm not going to take your soul. It's that you're going to do this, you're going to be great at it, and then you have to go practice law. And
it's not, have you read my diary? Because it's a little bit.
Very, very good. Thanks so much for that. So getting back to Brett, you had the story that the title was "The Fiddle's the Devil's Instrument." Was that at all inspired by Alice, or was there any connection with all of that?
So yeah, I actually wrote that story before I met Alice, though.
Oh, okay.
Perfect. There was a guy named Manly Wade Wellman, and he wrote horror stories set in the Appalachian Mountains. So same place Alice was running around with her fiddle, and he has a story. It's one of the best stories ever written. It's a horror story, but it's not really scary. It's more like a sort of a folk tale. It's called 9 Yards of Other Cloth. And in that story, one of the lines is there's a fiddle in the story. And one of the lines is the fiddle is the devil's instrument. So that was a collection of short stories I wrote. And that's what I decided to call it, sort of an homage to Manly Wade Wellman. Before I got into the whole podcasting thing, I can't do one thing. I'm kind of like Alice. Alice
Sure.
always doing something, whether it's she's dancing or she's, playing the fiddle, or now she's doing a podcast. And I'm always the same way. Like I always had to have something going on other than practicing law or going to school. And I, for a while, wrote a lot. And I wrote a lot of stories, wrote a couple of novels, as we talked about earlier, all in sort of that Lovecraftian genre. I really like that. I always liked that sort of weird fiction, cosmic horror thing. So I did that for a while, leading up really to the point where we decided to do the podcast, and kind of had to put the writing aside because the podcast takes up a lot of time. There's a lot of writing involved in the podcast because you have to write all the scripts and everything else. And one of those things I want to go back to because it really is sort of something that I always loved doing. It was a labor of love. But, you know, there is only so much time in the day. You know, it's just
unfortunately, yeah.
Do all this. And it's because this is all we do, right? We can work, we have families, and we have a podcast. We don't have any hobbies or anything like that anymore. So that's where we're at in life right now.
There you go. So I was joking with someone on the last episode, not that aired, but that I recorded, because he was also a lawyer, and then he went on to writing full time, like currently. And so you can be the judge of this, and I'm sure the statement's not true because I just say things as one does on a show themed around, whiskey. But I had made the joke that lawyers are frustrated writers who enjoy consistent paychecks. So is there any truth to that statement?
That is 100% accurate. And I often say most lawyers, I don't know what this says about the profession of law, but most lawyers really want to be doing anything other than being a lawyer. So they're always looking for an out, whether it's, writing or podcasting or contributing to, television shows or whatever. They're always sort of looking for a way out. But like you said, we do enjoy the consistent paycheck, and you can get that as being a lawyer. So you got a lot of people who are lawyers who are sort of looking for the way to not be lawyers.
Sure. And I've had so many people on the show too that are retired lawyers that retired and then we're just writing all the time. They're writing books and they come on and we talk about it. I'm sorry, Alice, did you start to say something?
Oh, no, I said another way to put it is just risk averse artists, right? Like everything that Brett was saying and I'm saying, it's not that, we just want to do the next thing. It's actually just creative outlets that honestly are pretty confined when you work a typical law job. There isn't a lot of room. You can understand why there isn't a ton of room for creativity when someone is like, I need you to help me, figure out the most important dispute in my life. Now's not the time for you to come up with a new way to think about this issue. So the podcast, writing, dancing, fiddling, those are all like the creative outlets that have to burst out because we have to be so, straight-laced in our day job.
Right. Sure. No, I think that's actually a brilliant way to put it. Because I was, before this year, I was a director for a medical device company. I was the quality regulatory director. So then everything is like, it's life and death. That's a little dramatic for what I was doing. Although at one point I was doing heart valves, so that wasn't so dramatic there. But for the most part, it wasn't life and death things. But it was like that super, like, you don't get to be creative and like try to sneak this through. It's like FDA is going to be in here, other auditors going to be in there. It's going to go out to an actual patient out there. You have to be on top of it. So then the writing, you need the creative outlet, whatever that might be. So dancing, fiddling. I really, it is so funny. So I should say this on the recorded part of the show. So my wife is a big fan of you guys. So she came on and met you beforehand, and we'll see. I'll see if she'll let me put some in as like some outtakes at the end. But she was in a mariachi band when she was in high school because she played the violin too. And so one of the things I think she loves so much about you guys' podcast is that she's like, oh my gosh, you're going to love this podcast. Brett is like so much like you. He's all into Mothmen and all these things. He's also a writer. And he's like, and then Alice is trying to keep him in line. And I was like, I can see it. So, but needless to say, I get it completely, right? There's some way you have to meet that creative need, and it's not a choice, really, right? It's like a necessity. It's some way to kind of find that outlet. So, very cool. Thanks for that. So, I like to ask on the show, and I don't know why I have a weird fascination with failure. And from the bios there, it didn't seem like there was a ton of it. But what I would like to ask both of you then is like maybe what would you consider your biggest failure? Like what's the thing you had tried to do that maybe failed or what happened?
I love that you asked that question because you're exactly right. What we put out there in general, now the social media age to a resume. A resume is meant to highlight the things that you're good at. And most people look at something like that and they think, oh, well, I could never aspire to something like that. Or that person's path was so easy. But in fact, I think, anyone when you get to know them, everyone bears their own struggles. And I think, Brett and I are both who we are today because of massive failures along the way. I wouldn't say it's a failure, but my whole life felt like a struggle in the sense that, I mentioned that my parents were immigrants, but they also didn't really speak English. They do,
Sure.
in the sense that, they know how to get by, but they were never confident in it. And so I didn't grow up speaking English, even though I grew up in the United States, until I went to public school. And, talk about being a weird kid. I grew up in the South,
Sure.
and I was not only the only, Asian in my whole school other than my brothers, but I was certainly the only one who spoke another language, so much so that I did not, could not communicate in English at all. And
What language was it?
Mandarin, Chinese.
It was Mandarin. Okay.
From Taiwan. And so really different. It's not like it's a romance language. You can kind of guess what people are saying. It was totally different.
Right. Yeah.
Because that was kind of my entree into the academic world, I always felt like I was an imposter. When I got into college and on a full ride, I felt like an imposter. I was like, surely they messed up. Like they messed up, and I'm just going to get a letter at some point before school starts that they meant to not only admit someone else, but they definitely didn't mean to give me a scholarship. And then I graduated and got, a job working for an amazing professor at Yale. And I was like, surely he doesn't actually know who he's hired. Once he starts working with me, he'll be like, you know what? You got to just take a hike because I have a reputation to maintain. And then when I applied to law schools and got into law school, I literally thought they're just going to call me and say, we messed up. We got the wrong person. And that's not a humble brag at all. It is a true, imposter syndrome that I think a lot of people have. And when people hear other, people they may perceive to have made it say that, I think it really opens up that the top is very, it can be accessible if you work hard, but also there's room at the top. And nor do I think I'm at the top, but I will say, I think I felt like an imposter basically my whole life, including starting the podcast. I didn't want to start a podcast with Brett because I was like, what do I have to say that anyone would want to listen to? Nobody needs to listen to this. So it's not one failure, but rather a really consistent theme that I've had to struggle with my entire life. And only recently, as I've talked a lot and counseled a lot of women and young lawyers and given speeches, because this podcast has given us a platform that I never envisioned before, being able to kind of speak these insecurities out loud and recognize that by speaking them, others are like, me too
Yeah, sure.
I see that we have to name the problem, and then if we kept saying no, the world could be missing out on so much that you have to offer.
All right. Thanks for that.
Yeah. And I'll just say, I think, number one, we have awesome lives. I mean, we are just in a great place. We're very blessed. So I hate to even talk about failure because it makes it sound like you're complaining. But I would say every cool thing I've ever gotten to do is because of some failure, basically. And probably the worst I've ever felt, and this just speaks to sort of my immaturity at the time, was right after I graduated from law school and started working for a law firm. And, you go to law school. Like Alice, I had no lawyers in the family. Didn't know any lawyers, just wanted to be a lawyer and didn't really know why. That's what I was going to do. And then obviously I was very blessed to get to attend Harvard Law School. But I didn't know what to expect. And when you get there, there's this very sort of, they really want you to go, even though they don't say this out loud. They want you to go make a lot of money and then give money back to the law school, right? As much as they talk
sure.
Bono and helping the world and making the world a better place. They really want you to is go be a partner at a top flight law school, which will help their stats, and then give back a significant portion of your salary to the law school. And they really hammer it in your head that if you're going to be successful, that's what you want to do. And so when I graduated from law school, I thought really the only thing you can do, which is stupid. I mean, I could have done anything, right? But in my mind, the only thing you can do is go to a big city and go to a law firm. That's what you have to do. And you just have to sacrifice years of your life until you get to this point. And I went to this big law firm. There were a lot of great people there, but I hated every minute of it. I was absolutely miserable. Like I had the worst heartburn at the time. Like I said, being an idiot, I'm 25 years old. I'm like, well, I guess I'm just getting old. That's what happens when you get old. You get really bad heartburn. 25, right?
Right.
I remember there was a moment it was like 9:00 at night. I was sitting in a conference room with this partner. It was one of the big sort of important partners at the law firm. We were having a deposition the next day. We just finished deposition prep for this guy who was the CEO of a major corporation. And we were going to go defend his deposition. and the lawyer, the partner, who is one of like the biggest guys in his area, he's like giving me a pep talk. And he says, I think you've got what it takes to be one of the best lawyers in the city. And I'm thinking, wow, this is real. Okay. This is the first nice thing he's ever said to me. Right. But then he says, but you got to be willing to make sacrifices. I've been divorced 3 times. My kids don't talk to me. I bill more hours than anybody else in this firm. This firm is my life. And that's what you've got to do. You got to be committed. And I'm like, and this is supposed to be inspiring me to want to be.
His pep talk was be a triple divorcee, like with kids that don't talk to him.
Make the sacrifices necessary for success. And I just remember sitting there thinking, I do not want to be like, right. I mean, you're amazing. You've done amazing things, but this is not what I want to do. And it was like leaving there that night. I just felt like I was this massive failure because that's what I was supposed to want to do. Right. I mean, he's telling me the same thing I've been hearing for the last 3 years. And now I'm going to be a failure. And I left the firm and I went to clerk for a federal judge in small town Alabama. And that guy was smarter, more accomplished, and did more to help people and was more involved in this community than anybody I'd ever met. And I thought, this is what I want to be like. And from that point forward, I wanted to be in public service, and I've been in public service ever since. But that moment of just feeling like I've done all this and I've just wasted it. I'm going to be a failure. I'm burning out. I'm 6 months into my job and I'm already burning out. What am I ever going to do? But because of that, it put me on the path to lead to where I am now. So I'm a big believer that failure, it feels crushing in the moment, but I think if you can always keep in mind that great things come from failure, from picking yourself up, from learning from it, I think that's really what makes us the people we are. And so I embrace all of my many failures. And as I often tell people, I have made mistakes, but I have no regrets because I'm exactly where I want to be, doing exactly what I want to do, with an amazing family, an amazing job, and now I have this podcast and everything else. So to me, like Alice said, embrace your mistakes.
Right. Sure. What I loved about the juxtaposition of the stories there was that Alice there's that theme of saying yes to things, right? Of like, there's the kind of a superpower in being willing to look foolish, right? It's like the karaoke superpower, like the people that are the best karaoke, like the ones that just go up and they can't sing, like the ones that have talent. It's not scary to go up there, right? The ones that go up and they belt it out and they're into it. So hers was so much about saying yes to things that like the fiddle and, the podcast and things. And then yours was almost the opposite. It's really saying no, I don't want to make those sacrifices, and then finding what's right for you. So I think it was a cool yin and yang, being able to kind of listen to that live as you guys were saying it, because it was like, it's not, it'd be so easy to just say yes, it's going to work out, but that's not always true, right? And like sometimes you have to say no, but sometimes, you say yes, cool, really cool things can come of it too. So. Very cool thing. If you're watching Writers Drinking Whiskey, you are taking part in the meaning economy. And I mean that sincerely, even if my voice kind of has an ironic tone. This show is all about uninhibited, authentic conversations. And the quest we are on together is finding the authors and the works that are going to add meaning to the world and stand the test of time. And to that end, I will be releasing my most ambitious novel yet, Pirates of Appalachia, as a weekly serial on Substack. Pirates has everything you're looking for in a novel. It has adventure, it has pirates, it has hostile corporate takeovers, prophecy, love, longing for belonging, heroes, villains, psychedelic shenanigans of the highest order. Think 1984 with the funny bone. Kurt Vonnegut, if you found him drooling in an alley after a 3-night bender. Twain, if you replace that badass mustache with an eye patch and negligee. And rest assured, no sensitivity readers were injured in the making of Pirates of Appalachia. So please check out Substack. It's meeting the market needs by connecting readers directly with today's very best storytellers. We're just skipping the corporate kind of media apparatus and the endless scrolls on Amazon or Instagram or whatever else. You can get directly to creators on there, get a taste for their work, and then follow along the people that you love. And now let's get back to your regularly scheduled programming. I must now unveil, though, the real reason I want you to be on the podcast, okay? Because I'm going to call this the legal brief, the Writers Drinking Whiskey legal brief. And what I want you guys to do is, I know you're, prosecutors, but I want you guys to play the judge and, adjudicate these marriage objections that have come up, over time. So this will be a really fun surprise for Claire when she hears this. The lovely Claire, as I like to say on the show, when she gets to hear this later on. So I'm going to give you guys, I think it's 4 scenarios here, and you guys just say, do you let it be, whatever. You're the judge, so there's just the objection. You guys can each make your own call.
I just have out there if we're playing this game. This is ex parte, meaning one of the parties is not here. So this is highly suspect, counselor.
Don't tell us which one of you is on which side, because we're always going to be on Claire's side.
That's right.
All right. I know. I've tried to word these without being too obvious here. So we'll see how you pick it up. And she did give me permission to do this, because I was like, do you want to know? If you're not gonna stick around, I do have some stuff in here. And she's like, I don't want to know. I'll just listen to it later. So all right, so the first one here. So you are watching a network TV show with your spouse, kind of like a Law and Order SVU or like Bones, back in the day. And there's a crossover episode. Have you guys seen those when they have the crossover, like the people come in? One spouse wants to immediately watch the other part of the crossover episode, even though you've never watched that show before. The other spouse objects. What says the court?
I guess I'll go first. I would. That's tough. Because I'm thinking of, this is different, but my wife and I watch all the Star Wars stuff, and there's like all these different, and you've got to watch them like in order to get everything. And so I'm always trying to keep it in the right order. I think you go ahead and watch the crossover episode. Maybe that's just me. Because I'll tell you, one of the reasons I think this is because if you had to watch the whole of the show, you might never get to it. Then you got to wait until the show you're watching. Like there's all sorts of practical reasons. I think you watch the crossover, then maybe if you like the crossover, then you watch the other episodes.
I was going to jump in and say you watch the crossover because you may never get to it again. And so it's kind of one of those triage situations in the law, right? You deal with the issue before you. Well, you have the crossover, you gather all the information you can about the crossover, and you deal with it. Based on your expression, did we just take Claire's side?
No, you didn't. You took my side. You just overruled her, actually. There was a real life example. We were watching Bones. She loves that old show Bones. And there was a crossover episode with Sleepy Hollow or something. I think it was on 3 seasons. Yeah, or something. And I was like, we have to watch that crossover, because it was such a weird crossover, because tonally they're not connected at all, And so we watched it, and she was mad at me the entire time, but I stood by the decision to watch.
And I'm not walking this back because I want to be on Claire's side. But I will say this. The one thing about that, like I was thinking like Chicago Fire and Chicago PD, and they're having a crossover. It's like, do I really have to watch all of Chicago Fire to get it? This is slightly different because Sleepy Hollow was such a weird show, like you were saying, that it would be better to know all the lore of Sleepy Hollow.
I can imagine that. You almost have to watch it to understand the crossover.
Right. Yeah, that was the funniest one I've ever seen. But they I don't think the networks have thought that through with streaming. When they do these crossovers, when you're streaming a show, it's this weird, sudden, intrusion. So, all right. So you guys ready for the next one? All right. So one spouse wants the socks to be right side out and t-shirts inside out when they're thrown in the laundry. But the other spouse asserts that they're a sovereign citizen and not subject to the rules and regulations of the laundry police. So there's an objection. There's some sleeping on the couch. What says the prosecutors?
I say whoever does the laundry gets to dictate how the laundry enters the wash. So if it switches back and forth, some days your shirt gets to be inside out, some days it cannot be. But I say the one who has to wash and fold, I have to say, because the folding is the terrible part. The washing, you just press a button, gets to dictate.
See, I've sort of inadvertently, I didn't mean to do this, so don't blame me for this, but I've sort of inadvertently conditioned my wife to do all the clothes because I'm still stuck in like the dorm, right? Where I don't separate whites from red shirts or anything else or towels. It just all goes in together. Yeah, not only am I not putting stuff inside out or anything like that. I mean, it's literally like every dirty piece of clothes I have goes in, gets all washed together, all dried together, and then I just deal with it. So I'm definitely the sovereign citizen when it comes to the laundry. So I'm going to go the sovereign citizen.
Very good. So we have a mixed ruling on that one. Okay. We broke on party lines because that one was very much, she does all the laundry. And she doesn't even ask me to like do whites and colors. It's just do like have your socks right side out and the shirts with like the graphics on it inside out. So I guess the graphics go away or something. And I can never remember.
That is the way you're supposed to wash shirts.
It protects the images. It's true.
Yeah.
I stand by my ruling.
Very good. Very good. Okay, so next one here. So you have limited storage in the garage. It's, so it's too packed to put a car in. You just have bins and way too much Christmas stuff, like more than any right size, like imagine a person would ever have in there. And then you, like, this is the general you accept a piece of exercise equipment that adds to all of that mess. And this is exercise equipment you've never henceforth said you wanted or anything. The other partner objects. Verdict?
I'm definitely with the other one on this one. Like you need to throw everything in the garage away. That's what I'm with, including the exercise equipment.
I have some follow-up questions for the parties.
Okay.
The exercise equipment was free.
It was free. Yes.
It was free. If it's free and there is already so much stuff in the garage that you can't fit a car into it, which is, I think, the only reason to throw everything away is to then fit a car into it, not to like replace it with other things. So if there is just like marginal space and it's free, it's not really taking up real estate in that sense. But if you were in the process of clearing things out to move that car in, then of course you can get rid of it. But I think if it's free and it's marginal space in an already pretty full garage, who knows? Maybe this is your year that you start Peloton.
So free, it's even more reason to throw it away because you have no investment in it.
No, then it's worth more. Then it's worth more because it's free.
What if the person dropping it off literally was dropping it off because they were they only stopped by on their way to Goodwill to give it away and said, hey, I have this Pilates machine. Does that change your mind in any way on this one?
Really doesn't. Not for me.
The answer definitely should have been no in that circumstance, but
all right. We have a split decision, and you're on my side on that one, Brett. I was trying not to get that plot.
I can imagine.
I almost had to sleep on the couch again for that one. I just backed off because you realize, like, oh no. Okay, you have have the machine. And then so the last one. Well, actually, no, one more after this. But so your spouse gifts you a doll-like creature that for some reason is like inexplicably popular. You have no idea why anyone goes and gets these things. You object, but everyone tells you you're being a monster by not loving this. What says the prosecutors?
I mean, is it haunted or anything, or is it just weird?
I wish it was haunted. Have you heard it? What's the real name? La Boo Boo.
I think that may be.
And they dressed it up as Kobe Bryant for me because it's funny. I was born you talked about Appalachia. I was born in Morgantown, West Virginia.
Oh.
And my family's all Western. So we're Yinzer and we're Appalachian. It's like my family. But I grew up, there's no Pittsburgh basketball teams. And I grew up mostly in the kind of LA area here, loosely LA area, Palmdale, like not Palm Springs, not the fancy people go to, like Palmdale's the place people go to, I don't know, throw their dad sofas away. Yeah. But yeah, apparently those are really popular. I guess the UK outlawed them because people were fighting over them.
Okay. No, I outlawed it in the UK. If it were haunted, you got to keep it. If it's cursed, got to keep it. But if it's just like weird.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could always put it with Mothman back there.
Right. I could, but Mothman's cool. This thing.
I say a gift comes from the heart. So you get that Labubu, a Mothman costume, and you give it a good hug every night and bring it out for Halloween and maybe put it on the Pilates machine the rest of the year.
Very good. Awesome. And last one here for our legal briefs portion. So again, the royal you here, you take out the smart, beautiful, kind, hardworking, completely out of your league in every way person. You go on several dates. You think things are going pretty well. And then this person objects. And that says they didn't realize you were dating. How do you rule? Like, if you're going out, like these are one-on-one dates, one-on-one dates, you're going to the movies, you're going to the beach. I think holding hands once or twice. But the other person says they didn't realize you were dating. So dating, not dating.
I mean, it sounds like dating to me, but I think in the interest of to continue on these trips, you just go with it.
I will say, growing up in the 90s, we were really into the DTRs, defining the relationships. So I can see how even if they were one-on-one dates with some hand-holding and some other, relationship type things that would lead you to think it's a relationship, there is a whole generation of us who, without the actual DTR, may not see it with the label until it's labeled.
Okay, very good, very good. Thank you. In fact, we did actually when we got sued. We're married now, so things worked out, and there's like legal contract on that front. But before the marriage contract, we actually wrote out a contract because after that, because I'm like, we were dating. I joke about how long it really was, but I would say it was like 6 months. So she was pregnant with our son and things, and none of that's true because I like to over exaggerate. But we actually wrote out a contract. I put this contract and we both signed it. So, and we're supposed to renew that every 10 years. I think that's actually the more serious contract than the marriage license. But
in the early days of Facebook, you would just say, were you Facebook official or not? I mean, that would be the question. But now nobody uses Facebook anymore. So I don't know how the kids do it these days.
It's all a mystery. It's all a mystery. Getting to the true crime, because I did want to talk, pick your guys' brains a little bit about the podcast and things. I wonder, like, so, not that true crime's necessarily a new thing, right? Because I remember like the forensic files and stuff, like when I was like 19 or 20 or so, being on Discovery or whatever channel was on back then. But the proliferation, I think I heard that it's like there's 5 million podcasts and 25% are true crime or something. Like, maybe the statistics aren't exactly right, but there's a huge, amount of interest, right? And people involved in it. Has the true crime kind of phenomenon, for lack of a better word right at the moment, has that changed the courtroom in any way? Like, has there been kind of, the inverse effect of it affecting how the operation of law goes?
So I think the proliferation of anyone with a microphone can have a podcast, which we're guilty of, right? We had no media training. We didn't seek to become, in the media world. Because of that, there's a lot of noise out there from people, especially in the crime world, who actually don't know much about the legal system, but they say their opinions as if it is in fact fact. And so I think because there are so many voices out there that have a lot of misinformation, and it may not even be malicious, it may just be because they have no idea, but they're speaking seemingly from a place of authority, that the jury pool or the general public who used to, we used to have a common language in what civics meant, what the reasonable person standard meant, what reasonable doubt meant. We no longer have that because we all become siloed and listen to the channels that we want to, that become an echo chamber of, well, I just believe in all conspiracies, so I'm only going to listen to YouTube channels or podcasts that talk about police conspiracies, or dog, you pick your conspiracy, there's going to be a channel or a Reddit, thread for you. And I think because of that, we have lost some of that ability. This is writ large. This is how we've seen media play out in general, news media, any type of media. We become siloed, which obviously then affects the courtroom to some extent, because if you go to jury trial, your jury is pulled from a jury of your peers. But if your peers are no longer having your shared experiences because you live just this lane, I only watch these kinds of documentaries, I only listen to these kinds of news outlets, I only listen to these kinds of true crime conspiracies or non-conspiracies, I do think there is a lost shared experience. And there is a difficulty if you're the prosecutor or even the defense attorney. You have to tell one story when you're in the courtroom that's supposed to appeal to 12 people you've never met who cannot talk back to you. That used to be a lot easier in the sense that we have a shared common language. I think that has lessened to a pretty big degree, actually. And we've seen it play out in real cases where it has an effect on the verdict or has an effect on how we view the justice system. We partly started our podcast. Everyone thinks they're saving the world, but we partly started our podcast knowing that there were these millions of podcasts out there, and we did not want to just be noise out there. We thought, there is an avenue where we could actually bring some good to the civic knowledge of our entire society, because these will be the people who come into the courtroom to experience either the jury system or maybe the worst day of their lives, because that's when they interact with the court system or with law enforcement or whatnot. We may have an opportunity to show people behind the curtain that it's not smoke and mirrors, that this is how investigations are run. These are the rules of evidence. This is what happens in a courtroom. Demystify the process so that hopefully we get back to that common language.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, I think you're right. True crime has been around for forever. One of the first stories in the Bible is a murder, and people love it. They love murder mysteries and Sherlock Holmes, and if you go back in the early 20th century, the Lindbergh baby, and all the way up through OJ and everything else. I think one thing you're seeing in one way that the latest sort of wave of true crime is affecting trials is also expectations, what juries expect. In the early 2000s, we had this whole, the CSI effect. Everybody's heard of that now. People watch CSI and they thought, wow, well, I'm going to be on a jury. There'll be fingerprints. There'll be DNA. They'll probably, they'll have telephones. They'll be able to basically do everything but show me a video of the murder. And the fact of the matter is, DNA you only have in like 20% of cases. Fingerprints on a gun, I think it's like 12% of the time you find a fingerprint on a gun, even if somebody's not wearing gloves. And people didn't know that. And so it took a while. Prosecutors really tried to educate people on the CSI effect and sort of the reality of that. Now, with podcasts and all this and true crime, a lot of times podcasts focus on wrongful convictions. And there's an obvious reason for that. We don't like injustice in this country, and they're often very dramatic. But a lot of times you'll have, in a wrongful conviction case, you'll have corrupt police, you have corrupt prosecutors and all this stuff. And when your entire experience of the justice system is listening to stories of corruption, you walk in to be a juror and you're not going to believe the police officer who testifies. You're going to look very skeptically at the government. And to a certain extent, that's fine. You should be skeptical until the evidence comes in. But at some point, you have to listen to the evidence. And we tell officers all the time, unfortunately, these days, it's not good enough for you to say, I saw him with the gun. We better test it for DNA and for fingerprints, because we're going to need something to bolster your statement. And some officers really have trouble with that. They're like, why would they think I would lie about that? Right.
Right. Sure.
But it's just the reality that that's sort of the position people are coming from. And as Alice said, you sort of see the conspiratorial nature of things. People love conspiracies and they're always looking for those. And I do think it's had an effect. And one way you're seeing sort of a reaction to that in the courts, so many more gag orders than you used to see. A lot of cases that get really any media attention at all. You're seeing these judges hand down pretty extensive gag orders, which those used to be incredibly rare. It's like only in the most extreme circumstances you have a gag order. And now you're seeing it more and more because courts are trying to get their hands around this sort of like Leviathan, that
sure.
It's really difficult because everybody does have a voice now. There's no gatekeepers. There's no filter. It's not going through a network or through like, Walter Cronkite that we all trust. Now it's just anyone can speak to it. And that democratization of voices is great in so many ways. But you also are seeing sort of the negative effects that can happen in the court system.
Right. Well, how do you, so when they sequester a jury or something, right? Is it that, are they take the cell phone and everything too? Like, are they taking all the electronics away and just leaving you, I guess, network TV maybe, or, even network TV is rough. Like, how do you actually strip all of that away if you really don't want them to?
So like in the Delphi case, Delphi was a case out of Indiana where they were sequestered. And I think they could only call their family at a certain designated time with like a court employee in the room. I mean, it gets kind of ridiculous. It's almost like you're in prison, right? And they could only watch movies. They couldn't watch the news. I think in OJ, the jurors talked about how they just watched all these movies together all the time because they couldn't watch any television. So it can be really limiting, and judges hate doing it. They hate sequestering jurors. And a lot of times they don't. And that's always a criticism and just really difficult decisions. I mean, you got a jury who's going to do a month-long trial. You really going to sequester them away from their family,
Right.
away from friends?
Well, especially with how people are habituated with their phones and things, right? I mean, it's not cruel. I mean, that's kind of far, but I can also see like mentally some of these people, right? When you're when you're addicted to your phone, right? Like people go on all the time. There's an addiction factor to it, and then go, okay, you're going cold turkey for a month, and you do this trial, like you're gonna have the grumpiest jury and like and all history after that.
And the sequestering, you're right. The sequestering only affects what they hear or see during the trial. But what we're talking about with the lack of a gatekeeper function and the lack of a common shared experience and language is that you're getting jurors walking in who already have their minds made up about a lot of things. And we see this when we do voir dire. You would be pretty surprised the things that people say behind closed doors when we call them back to ask them, what did you mean when you raised your hand and said that you could never convict someone? And they truly think, well, I've seen all the documentaries. I know that all the police do is plant evidence to get a conviction. And the justice system is just, it's a completely crooked. So I could never convict anyone because I know the whole thing is just a setup. You can show me all the evidence and I'll know it's fake. We have real potential jurors who say that and they truly mean it. And that has nothing to do about they can be sequestered to, they could be in a black box room and never see another thing. It doesn't matter. Their mind has already been shaped by everything they've seen before they even walk into the courtroom.
Sure. I understand that completely. Yeah, no, thanks for that. Yeah, I was wondering about that because it is so with the media landscape, right? Even just like the news generally, right? Like I always say, and I know everyone mocks me for it, but I try to like a half hour to an hour of news is all I want a day. And that's partially because I listened to there's an old podcast, or maybe still on, The Hidden Brain, and the guy Shankar Fadali, I believe was his name, and it was during one of the hurricanes. I think it was Harvey. I think there was one that hit Houston. And he came on, they're like, well, what do you tell people that just watch the hurricane coverage all day? And he was like, well, when you actually do that, you're less likely to do anything. You're going to feel hopeless. You're going to feel despondent. He's like, back in the 50s when there was 1 hour of news a day, that was actually a lot healthier because you could be informed, know what was going on without it completely, just making you dejected. And you would actually do something if you were so inclined. And then just with I know with Claire, with listening to all the true crime, when she started doing that, it was a lot more of like, wait, are the doors locked? And usually I always make sure they're locked or whatever. And we have so many dogs. I keep muting my thing. Hopefully you guys aren't hearing them. But right to my side over here is the backyard. So we have 2 chocolate labs and we have a Frenchie. And they usually get along, usually they'd be hanging out right here, but they're outside so that they're not tripping over wires and things as I record this. But so I'm like, we have 4 dogs in this house. We're all locked, but she'll still be like, okay, wait, are the cameras on or this on? And so I can get that completely because then you start to expect video evidence. You start to expect all those things. I didn't even realize as you said it, Brett, I didn't realize it was 20% with DNA. I still would have thought not 100%, but I would have thought it would have been higher when you said that number. So I get that completely. How for you guys covering the case, and is maybe twofold. There's the covering the case on the podcast, and then there's the actual being in the jury room. There's the crafting the story, right? You mentioned earlier you have to tell a story in there. How do you take into account how crazy, like just, it's weird. The world's crazy and dysfunctional and also like all in one place, right? So everyone's on YouTube, but they're just on different channels. But when you guys go into the courtroom versus when you guys go into the podcast room, how do you think about, crafting those stories?
Yeah, I mean, when you go into the courtroom, you're restrained by the rules, right? The rules of evidence, the rules of whatever criminal procedure. There are things that we, in this country, that we practice in. There's the Constitution, there's laws of the jurisdiction where you're practicing. And there's something, for example, you can't talk about your criminal defendants, all their bad acts. For example, you're just getting them for, say, one robbery. You can't talk about how they also own, guns with silencers that are illegal, all these things, if they had nothing to do with the crime. And part of that is because we have to focus on the evidence for that particular crime. And so you are, appropriately so as the prosecutor, more hampered in how you are presenting the case against them, because we don't want you to be convicting people based on statistics. For example, everyone who lives in this neighborhood, they're always shooting people. So this guy's probably guilty because he has this address. That's an example, right? You may laugh and think that's ridiculous, but that's what the rules are meant to do. They're meant to take away certain things from the prosecution so that you're just looking at the case before you. Now, the podcast, why has been such a wonderful kind of outlet to what we do on a daily basis, is you always have to think about the victim when you're a prosecutor, of course. But in order to seek justice for the victim, you can't become a therapist. You can't, devolve into puddles of tears every time you look at a victim statement. Because as the professional, you have to look at the evidence, you have to look at your legal theory. If it's sound, you have to work within the judicial system to get justice for the victim. And so by virtue of that, you can't spend hours sitting with a victim's family, for example. That's not appropriate in some instances. They may be witnesses. There's a lot of things that go into that. And so in some ways you have to have the emotional separation. But when we research and tell the story of a case that we do not work on our podcast, we're able to take into account kind of the meta environment, whether it's the crazy conspiracy theories or the actual background of the person we're talking about. It is relevant that they actually have this incredibly extensive rap sheet, a violent rap sheet, and this is just like after a slew of crimes, this is their 30th incredibly violent crime. That's really relevant for the storytelling and to understand, are monsters made or are they born? The kind of these really big questions that we are all trying to seek to understand. And we get to really delve into the impact that these crimes have on not just victims, but what is the definition of a victim? There are so many victims in all of these stories. There's obviously the victim that this happened to, but then there's the, externalities of this particular crime. And we get to think about these bigger philosophical questions that we don't get to in our day job out of necessity, because if we were to spend all our time on these philosophical weighty questions, we wouldn't have the opportunity to go to court and get justice for that particular victim. So they're kind of, different sides of the same coin, but we get to exercise, the empathy part of ourselves and the human aspect of ourselves and the storytelling part of ourselves more so on the podcast.
Sure. Is it kind of fulfilling in that way then? Like, I could see like being a prosecutor being really frustrated with, man, this guy is excuse my French here, but a douchebag, right? Like this guy, look, there's all of this. And if you could know all of this, you'd probably see that this isn't a stretch, right? And we have this evidence and this all links together. When you can't do that, but is it almost cathartic to be able to kind of talk about it on a podcast where it's not the jury, but you can still kind of tell that full story of the situation?
It is for me. I mean, because again, I want to properly convict people in the court of law, because you are doing something you're taking someone's constitutional rights away. So I want to make sure, I want to err on the side of this person, all the evidence is there beyond a reasonable doubt to have them convicted. But the podcast, we're asking questions like, why does this happen? There will always be crime. We understand that. But why? How can someone, like in the Alec Murdaugh case, how can a father who is a just, stalwart paragon in his community, who is very well off, who succeeded in just about everything he's touched, how can a father like that shoot his wife and son point blank? What drives a human being to do things like that? I mean, those are all questions that I think draw people to true crime, and I think are really, they're existential questions that we get to wrestle with in a way that helps me make sense of the world and also the profession that I've chosen.
And I'll just add to that. I mean, I think Alice did a really good job of describing how it's different. I like how you call it storytelling, because it is storytelling. And one way that it's similar is both in trial and on the podcast, you are telling a story. And the way we do the podcast is the same way that you do present a story in a trial. You present the evidence, and then based on the evidence, you make an argument. And that's sort of what we do. And I think it's one way that we're different from a lot of other true crime podcasts. There are a lot of podcasts that just tell the story, and that's fine. They just sort of lay out what happened and, see you next week. And if it's a mystery, they leave the mystery open. And that's the way they do it. We wanted to do it a little different. We wanted to tell you all the facts. And then we wanted to say, okay, now that we know the facts, let's figure out what actually happened based on that. And that's sort of what you're doing in a trial. If you think about a trial, you're calling your witnesses, you're introducing evidence, you're getting it all out there. And then the last thing you do is a closing argument. You say, okay, hey, we've now seen all the evidence. What does it tell us? It tells us X, Y, and Z. And so one way that it is similar is that we go through that same process in the podcast. And yeah, it is cathartic to be able to tell the whole story. And Alice is 100% right. I mean, people wonder, like, why can't you talk about all the bad things they did? It is relevant. Shouldn't we know that? But as Alice said, the system is designed to protect the innocent as much as it is to punish the guilty. And the last thing we want, just because you're a scumbag who did a lot of terrible things in the past, doesn't mean you did this terrible thing. Maybe they're related. Right. Maybe it can come in anyway. But generally speaking, you don't want a jury saying, you know what, I don't actually really care whether you did this or not. You're back in prison. So trials are a little bit more constrained than maybe your average podcast.
Right. And rightfully so. I think it's a good point.
Clickety clack, clickety clack, clickety clack. Ding. Oh, hello. You caught me right as I was putting the finishing touches on my epic absurdist satire, Pirates of Appalachia. And now it is time for the long road to publication and the long editing process. You know, as writers, we spend tons of time editing our work. The hardest part, I think, of the editing process was really like the proofreading, the copy editing, because you were so immersed in it. I've just spent 13 years immersed in Pirates, got it all together, went through, edited it front and back by characters, all these different asymmetrical ways. And still, it's going to have typos in it. And they're going to horrify me one day if I ever find those in the actual printed edition. The way I combat that is with Edit GPT. You found today's sponsor. The link is on the screen now. I'm going to put it here. Here's the link. If you're on the podcast forum and you can't see me pointing up at that link, if you're on a podcast, you're really missing out. I'm really animated with my hands. But if you can't find it on there, feel free. You'll find it in the description. It helps support the show, helps restock the bar, helps keep this guy happy so that we can keep putting all these shows out there for all of you. Thanks for everything. Let's get back to the writing, because Pirates of Appalachia is not going to finish itself. The one thing Edit GPT cannot do is save the file for you. So I'm going to make sure to save that now. So I want to get back to my work. You get back to your regularly scheduled programming.
And that was about as much seriousness as I can do in a short span. So now, with it being Writers Drinking Whiskey, I have a special portion of the show I call Shots. So, Brett, if you have the bottle writers tiers, be ready with that. But it's a rapid fire questions. So you don't have to drink with all of it, but shots is in rapid fire questions. And I like to start all of these with some trivia. And I'm going to do a trivia board. I keep promising this. I have a leaderboard. I keep track of the points. They're all fictional, made up points because I'm a fiction writer. But I wanted to start with, because in all of the forums, all the prosecutors and legal brief forums, all the talk is which prosecutor comes from a better state. So these are going to be Alabama versus Texas questions. Your name is your buzzer, so I'll ask it. You guys say, Brett, Alice, and then you can answer, and then whoever gets the point. So are you both ready?
So ready.
Let's do it.
Okay, very good. Which state has won more college football championships?
Brett.
Alice.
That would be Alabama.
Well, would be Alabama. Brett called it first and got it.
Texas knows that.
Even Texas knows that. I got to give it to you on that one.
Yeah. It was 20 or because there's the disputed ones, right? So there's 20 or 23, and then 8 or 15 for Texas. Texas was like almost half of them are disputed, so that seems kind of sad. And Texas has experienced longer championship drought, despite having way more FBS programs. So not to throw insult in, this is just what the Google box told me when I looked these questions up. So Texas is obviously the larger state in size and population.
My state a little while jabbing at Brett's state then? I have a theory for why, with having better programs, why that is. When you live in a state where there's so many options to do other things other than football, oh, yeah, I went there. You can have some great players, but there's just so many options. You could do music. You can go to the museum, that sort of thing. But
something about the paper
way to go on just focusing on football, Brett.
We hear that in California, too. So that's also a Californian argument. We like to talk that, too. So Fair enough. Okay, so getting back to the next one here. So Texas, larger in size and population, right? How many times could you fit the population of Alabama into Texas? I'll give you guys 4 choices here. 3 times, 5 times, 7 times, or 9 times.
Alice. 7 times?
Oh, that's not right. That's close, but not it.
9 times, I guess.
I was going to say 5. Is 5 an
Five
option?
is the correct answer. 2 for 2. Man, that's okay. You got to catch up now, Alice, because there's only 5-6 questions here. So actually, for that, you get first. You don't know buzzer, Alice. You get to go first on these next 2 to see if you can catch up and get to the tiebreaker. Which of the states is featured in more song titles?
Whew.
Which state is featured in more song titles?
Texas or Alabama?
People do love singing about Alabama and how it's a sweet home. I'm going to go with Texas, though.
And you're right.
Oh,
You nailed
boo.
it.
Demand a recount.
Well, so according to the AI bots that helped me with that
Clearly
one,
wrong.
Texas has about 600 to 700 song titles with the name. Alabama is about 150 to 200. Yeah.
Wow.
All of my exes live in Texas, so.
Yeah.
I was surprised. I looked it up. I'm like, I wonder what it is, because there is
The more famous ones definitely are Alabama, though, in the title.
the more famous. I think you're right. I think that's what jars the thinking. I think the more famous ones is Sweet Home Alabama. The Alabama ones really stick out more.
I should count quadruple or something. I don't know.
Hey, Alabama boy, the math still doesn't work out. Sorry, you're seeing how spicy.
Isn't how many it was? It was like it was a range.
I knew this would bring out the kind of sibling rivalry kind of between you two. Which state ranks higher on the happiness according to the website that does on the interweb that says which state's happier?
I'm gonna go with Texas.
All right, and Texas it is. You tied it up. Texas was not very high. Texas was 38. Alabama was 44. My lovely birth state
Texas
of
is so. I thought Texas would be like 2 or something, and so it was like obviously gonna be.
I thought it would be higher too. Actually, I was a little surprised where it was. My country roads take you home is 48 on the list. So I mean,
I don't buy it.
Yeah, I don't buy it either. I'm like, there's a whole song like John Denver. Everyone knows it. Like,
What was number 1? Like Massachusetts. Always something like.
Well, number 1 was Hawaii, so it's kind of yeah. Very good. Okay, so the tiebreaker. So again, your name is your buzzer on this one. So no one gets to go first. Statistically, and this one isn't Texas or Alabama because it's just the tiebreaker here. Statistically, which profession has the highest rate of heavy drinking? Writers or lawyers?
Brett.
Lawyer.
Oh, it was so close.
I don't know
Lawyers
which one it
are
was.
good. Go ahead, Brett. What was yours?
I would love to think it's writers, but I'm sure it's lawyers.
We have a tie then, because I'm not sure. I'll try to do the replay in slow motion to see whose name came out first. I didn't quite catch it. It was lawyers. It was about 20% of heavy drinking. Arts and entertainment, because you can't break out just writers out of that, was 11.5, which was
If
a
it was
little
just
lower
writers,
than
it'd be
expected.
like 50. So
Yeah. Exactly. That might actually be the case.
Players bringing that number down.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so just rapid fire questions now, and you guys could just take turns answering them. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Whew. So it wasn't like get divorced 3 times and the best piece of advice I've ever received. Well, that's hard. I don't know. Do you have an answer, Alice, while I'm thinking about this?
Yeah, since we're talking about professions and we're talking about lawyers and how much they drink, I would say is not to, and this is, everyone says this, but it truly is true, especially in a profession like law. Don't put off your life thinking you're going to reach another gold star on your resume. Truly, especially in an unforgiving and thankless job as the law, no one's going to thank you for, getting a divorce, getting 3 divorces, having your kids not talk to you. There are so many of my colleagues who put off getting married even until they pay off their law school debt. You know how long that debt service is for? Like 30 years. It's like a mortgage. That's a really long time, and if you love someone, whatever, get married or don't, whatever, but don't base it on, something like that. Or they put off having kids if they want to have kids until they make partner. They may never make partner. And also, partner is really a pie eating contest where you get more pie. It's not really.
Sure.
So that's my my advice on the career side.
The problem for me is basically all the advice I've ever gotten was terrible advice. So, but I will say this: the judge for my clerk told me that I needed to like quit wasting time and get married, and that was really good advice. I should have listened to that earlier, but I did end up marrying my girlfriend at the time, so it worked out. But I'll give him credit for that because, like I said, most of the advice I've gotten, and maybe my advice to your listeners is don't necessarily listen to the advice you're getting, because I could list like 10 different things people told me that was terrible advice. Most of them, but
that leads perfectly to the next question, because the next question logically was going to be, what's the worst piece of advice? And maybe you covered it earlier with the get divorced 3 times and whatnot. But is anything else, or Alice, do you have an example?
Yeah, sure. I would say the worst advice was not being true to myself. So many times, because I was being a prosecutor, I was it's a male dominated field. That's no surprise. The legal field is a male dominated field, especially kind of in the upper echelons. And people are always telling me, make sure you speak a certain way, be brusque. Don't, ask people how their day is, or, wear muted colors, don't wear bright red lipstick, And I tried that for a little bit, and it just wasn't true to who I was. I didn't register with witnesses. I didn't, couldn't speak to jurors. And once I just was myself, yeah, no one else looks like me. And that's actually really great, because maybe I'll be memorable. Maybe people will think, yeah, she's being authentic. I can really talk to this person. What she has to tell me, it's all storytelling in court. What she's trying to tell me, I can trust, because she's being authentic in everything she's doing. So a lot of people told me I had to fit into a certain mold. If you're an Ivy League lawyer, practicing law in with the big dogs, you have to act a certain way. Sometimes I show up to court in a backpack as opposed to like a really expensive bag. I have nothing to prove. The backpack is really great for my posture.
Very true. Very true. What's the biggest disagreement you two have ever had?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, probably when I tried to convince Alice that we need to do a podcast, and like the first 15 times I told her, she told me I was crazy. And then I had to wait until she was like, she just had a baby and was under heavy sedation. Then I suggested again, and she said yes. And then I never asked again. I just immediately got all the equipment and was like, okay, we're starting a podcast. You said we're doing it. I'm going to go with that.
Very good. What about you, Alice?
Oh, that really is true.
That really is it. Okay.
For like a year, and we're good friends. And I just kept telling him he was crazy. I guess the other fight is, but this is ongoing. We both are constantly be like, we do too much. Like, when are we gonna what's gonna give? That book's not gonna write itself. Like, should we do another podcast? Why did we add a podcast to this? And so that's not a fight so much as we are negatively life coaching each other, because neither of us.
It goes back to that bad advice. We give each other bad advice all the time.
The devil on each other's shoulders, just like going,
do more. You can do more.
Right. There's a third podcast in there. That reminds me, before I hit the next question, because I think I had it on here anyways, is that one of your episodes you had mentioned, I think Brett specifically here, an Unsolved Mysteries Revisited podcast. Is that in the works? Are you guys working on the Unsolved Mysteries Revisited podcast?
It's a great idea, and I hope someone else goes with it.
Fair enough. Awesome. So the next one, actually, it works out perfectly with the next one here. I always like to ask it because it's near, as you saw, the Bigfoots and Wolfmen and everything I have around me. Have you ever witnessed anything inexplicable?
No, much to my chagrin. I've tried to, but I have not. I have sought out the paranormal, but the paranormal does not like me.
Very good.
Same answer, but because of different reasons. I have fled from all paranormal things. I never want to see it. If something was happening in front of me that was absolutely paranormal, I would just close my eyes and be like, you know what? I don't see it. I don't see it. It's okay.
It's not happening.
Do your thing and leave, okay?
I'll tell my only ghost story I have. Alice, okay. But so, in addition to writing the horror novels, I also used to do paranormal investigation. Was part of this paranormal investigation group, and we'd go to like old houses and stuff and sit around in the dark with our recorders, try and get EVPs and orbs and all this other stuff. And so we were at one place. It was like a 200-year-old mansion in this room where it was like an octagon. This guy who had owned it 100 years ago, he'd killed himself in that room and supposedly it was haunted. And there are all these doors. And so I walked around, I closed every one of the doors myself, personally, closed every one of the doors. And we all sat down, and the guy who's sort of leading the group, we turned on the recorders, and he's like, if there's anyone here with us, give us a sign. And at that moment, one of the doors that I had personally closed slowly swings open. That was the closest I ever got to like a paranormal event. And I don't know what happened. As I said, I closed the door myself, so I know it was closed. That is the only thing. And then like we thought, wow, now it's, who knows, it's going to appear or something. Nothing else happened. But that was a cool one.
That's a cool one. If you guys are ever out in the Los Angeles area, you let us know, and we'll go to the Queen Mary, which is supposed to be super haunted. Me and the lovely Claire go fairly commonly, actually. We like to go because you can stay the night. They have a murder mystery dinner, and they have a little speakeasy on board. So, and they keep adding things. So it's a pretty fun little, and they have the paranormal stuff. We've done the ghost walk, of course, and they have multiple ones and all kinds of stuff. So it's super fun. So, all right. So let's get to the next one here. Better legal writer, James Patterson or John Grisham?
Cool. John Grisham, I enjoy John Grisham better. Neither one of them are very accurate in their legal descriptions.
That was actually meant to be the question. I wrote it down right. I meant to say more accurate, but so neither is very accurate, but you like Grisham.
Let's just put it this way. If any legal writer wrote accurately, they would sell no books.
You would never have heard of him.
This is true. This is true. I can believe it. All right. And then here. Oh, okay. So there is a lawyer who the Guinness Book of World Records says is the most successful lawyer ever, Sir Lionel LaCour. And he apparently won 245 murder trials in a row before jury or appeal. And then thus we call him Sir now. He's Sir Lionel now, thank you. And he was famously, I think this was 40s, maybe 50s. I could look it up, but he was famously challenged to apply his legal prowess, right, his legal analysis to the resurrection of Jesus. And he summarized with it, I say unequivocally that the resurrection of Jesus Christ is so overwhelming that it compels acceptance by proof, which leaves absolutely no room for doubt. So that's what he came up with. Now I'm going to put some of these on you, on the hot topics of today, based on your legal prowess, not like your belief systems. Legal prowess here. UAPs, the artists formerly known as UFOs.
Yeah,
this world or not.
UFOs are fine. Why do we have to change it? I don't understand.
Either.
Man, you put me in a bad place because my heart and my head, heart and head.
Right. I mean, this is the legal mind. The legal mind right here is what we want.
I find it, well, I mean, if I had to apply my legal mind, I would say probably not actually visitors from another planet.
Okay, fair enough. What did you say, Alice? I missed it there.
I was saying he was having an internal battle because he loves UFOs.
So what says you, Alice?
I will say the evidence is inconclusive, which means it doesn't rule out anything.
There you go. There you go. Sasquatch.
Hey, man. He's clearly real.
I see him behind you right now. So clearly
he's well, she's right behind me. I think it's Patty back there. Yeah, so it's a she.
Gimlin film. A lot of people looked at it and says it's real. So I'll go with Bigfoot exists.
All right. Very good. Very good. I actually had on Jeff Meldrum. If you remember him from the Bigfoot shows, he's the guy, he's a physical anthropologist, Dr. Jeff Meldrum. I get to talk 2 hours Bigfoot. I was like so excited. And I'm thoroughly convinced legally and scientifically Bigfoot's real. So right choice there, prosecutors. All right. Here, ghosts.
Oh, well, of course, ghosts are real. I can't say they're not.
Whether you call them ghosts, spirits, souls, absolutely real.
Absolutely real. Okay. And then last one here, my favorite one, the reason I wore the shirt here, if I can get it in the thing, the Mothman.
Real. I think we said it was real, right? When we covered it.
I'll be the cold water prosecutor. I think he's not real. That there are owls, there are things that people have perceived to be Mothman and that people have truly thought that they saw Mothman. But let me tell you this, if I see anything that looks like a Mothman, I'm running.
Very good. Have either of you, Brett, did you ever go to the Mothman Museum? I'm trying to remember the episode. It's been a little while since we listened to that one.
Point Pleasant?
Point Pleasant, yeah.
No, we tried really hard to get invited to the Mothman Festival. Like, we sent them all sorts of emails like, hey, we'd love to come up, just hang out. And they just never responded. So
sure.
I want to go to the Mothman Fest. I want to go up there sometime because I love West Virginia. I don't know, despite your
West Virginia's great. Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's a wonderful state. It's a great place to visit. So I'll get up there eventually.
Okay, very good. All right. And I like to ask one AI overlord question. I call it the AI overlord question of the day. So I plug it into the AI and tell it I'm interviewing the prosecutors. What should I ask them? And AI is extremely wordy. Sometimes I think I'm wordy, but it puts me to shame here. So bear with me as I read the AI overlord question, and then you guys get through it. So you've delved into some incredibly dark and complex cases. Inevitably, these stories leave a mark. Can you share how exploring these true crimes has affected your personal perspectives on the justice system, human nature, or even the world around you? Is there a particular case or a specific element of your work that has stayed with you long after the microphone was turned off? Thank you, AI overlords. I'm with you when you take everything over. I think you can just sum it down to, is there a case that's stuck with you?
Yeah. The thing is, because we work in this area, we already were aware of a lot of the stuff that we talk about. The cases that always stick with me are the disappearances. I don't know that I can speak to a specific one. I'll give you, there was, oh God, what's his name? Alice, do you remember the guy who was watching the Super Bowl? David.
He ended up in Seattle.
He was definitely there. I can't remember his name, but so we covered a case of a guy who was back when the Cowboys were good. So that tells you how old the case was. I think his name is David. But he was in Texas. He loved the Cowboys. He was going to watch the Super Bowl. He makes himself a sandwich, puts it's back when he had VCRs, puts a tape in to record the game. I used to do that. And his wife had gone shopping. So she's like leaving him to his football, whatever. So she goes off shopping. She comes back, TV's on, game is recorded. They didn't have a timer. So he would have recorded it. He would have pushed record. Sandwich is sitting on the table. He's disappeared. This is in Texas. 2 days later, a guy is walking down the street, no ID, wearing like camouflage clothes, gets hit by a car and dies. 10 years after that, they realize it was the same guy. So this guy had been in Texas getting ready to watch the Cowboys. And then 2 days later, he's in Washington State getting hit by a car and nobody knows why he was there. So that kind of case sticks with me. The ones, it is almost paranormal, right? It's so inexplicable, but it absolutely happened. And those are the kind of cases that I can't get over them. One of the first cases we did was a girl named Maura Murray who disappeared in the mountains. Similar thing, car breaks down, somebody comes by, says, you okay? She said, I called AAA. 2 minutes later, she disappears. Nobody sees her again. Those are the ones that stick with me.
Sure. I think you guys covered one too, where there was like a truck driver. He just kind of just drove out. I don't know if he was on drugs or what, but it just kind of yeah, I get it completely. Thanks for that. Alice, what about you?
Yeah, I know. I think the sad part is that because we work in this field, we actually are exposed to a lot more of the darkness of human nature than most people want to even, on a daily basis. We say this all the time. We're like, the reason there's no conspiracy here is, unfortunately, if you open up, any sort of a sourcing, there's going to be child abusers all around you, for example. That is a fact in terms of looked up like a SORNA registry. You will be shocked how many are registered within probably a mile of you, or how many people, abuse different systems. But something that covering these stories on the podcast has really opened my eyes to, because we're able to delve into all the human aspects of the case, is the role of mental illness, both in victims and in perpetrators. And that's not something that's foreign to us in the legal system, but we are always dealing with mental illness in our positions from the legal system. Obviously, you can't, even if mental illness is to blame, you can't have a dangerous person out there, stabbing everyone who comes by. You have to do something about it.
Right.
But once that person gets into the criminal justice system, locking them away isn't necessarily going to fix the underlying problem. And there can just be continued hurt. Same with, victims, whether they're victims or, the literal first case we covered was Elisa Lam. It's a case that people say is about the paranormal and all these strange things.
Sure.
And
that was the one in Los Angeles here, right? The Cecil Hotel, I think.
Yeah, it's devastating. And, our conclusion, spoiler alert on that first episode, is that we actually think mental illness had a lot to do with what happened and no one was hunting her. But in doing, we jokingly call ourselves the cold water prosecutors. We're trying to demystify things. And I think when you look at a lot of these mysterious cases, they really are demystified because you have to come to terms with the fact that there is a lot of darkness in human nature, which is scary to think about. But what I try to, look at is, well, what led us here? We all typically want to survive. So what leads us to these really dark places in society and in humanity? And what can we do? What is the answer so that we don't continue to go down that dark path? It will always exist. But I do think trying to explore the why has been something that I'm able to do through the podcast. And it does keep me up at night. I don't understand how mothers and fathers can kill their own children, for example. Those cases really stick with me because I can understand a lot of depravity. That is one element of depravity that is really hard for me to wrap my head around. Even though I prosecuted and investigated those types of cases, it still hits home every time we cover a case like that.
Right. Sure. Thank you for that. And then so finally for our shots portion here, favorite podcast and why is it Writers Drinking Whiskey?
Yeah, I mean, you stole my answer. So,
there's always like this awkward silence after I ask that. That's my favorite part of asking it that way.
I mean, I guess I'll give a true crime answer. Since it's obvious what the actual answer is. Okay, so I mean, I got a lot of podcasts that I like. I mean, they're mostly true crime podcasts. I mean, I listen to a lot of true crime. Probably not surprising anybody. So I'll give a non-true crime answer. So I'll be a little different. So have you heard of Mr. Ballin? He's got a YouTube page.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I love his podcast. He does a podcast too. His YouTube page is great, but the podcast I think is sort of underrated. Really good. Covers some really interesting stories. Some of it's true crime. Some of it's some of the more paranormal, mysterious type stuff. I really like that. And then I'll say for true crime, we have a buddy who's a former FBI profiler who has a podcast called The Consult. And it's always interesting to hear these FBI profiler, behavioral analysis unit, mind hunter type people talk about these cases because they look at it in a different way. So I'll say those two is favorite.
Very good. Thank you for that.
So I'll take a contrarian view somewhat. In the 5 years of doing a podcast, the number of podcasts I've listened to has actually shrunk incredibly. Now just to Writers Drinking Whiskey. That's like the only one I'm doing. So it's really an honor to be here. But truthfully, I've been trying to do this thing because we have constant input of information. I've actually tried to step away from audio input, go back to, well, you'll like this as a writer, paper copies of things. And the only way I'm able to do that is if I turn off the earbuds for things. And that's only because we spend so much of our time, listening to podcasts for research or being on podcasts that I've actually found myself needing to go back to reminding myself how to be able to focus on a page for hours on end, because even in legal research, it's all on the computer now. I actually don't like that. I wish we still had all our law books and I had to cross-reference because I think I'm able to focus better in that sense. But I actually like nonfiction, not true crime. True crime scares me, if you can't already tell. Of the paranormal and the scary things in life. When I'm prosecuting the case, I'm fine because I'm working within the bounds of evidence and I have a mission. But I actually get scared really easily and prefer kind of the how to make yourself better, health podcasts and like I haven't hacked any of those things, but if I listen
all right. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thanks very much. And I get that completely, actually. I try to, there's just the consumption, right? Your brain gets so used to when you're always consuming. So I like paperbacks for one when I'm reading. I really like a physical book. I very little do I do any screens because I'm on the screens all the time anyways. But I've tried to cut back on my time listening to things. Like when I work out, that's a perfect time. I can, sit down and kind of listen to something and keep my brain engaged. But even like driving, sometimes I try to like just turn some music on and just let my mind wander a bit. So the point's well taken. So thanks so much, guys. So I like to say it's last call. You don't have to go, but you'll have to restart the video. So, and I wanted to end our conversation with is that, specifically for you guys, so everything's always a hot take. Like in sports, you see this all the time too, right? It's a hot take, In true crime, you see that too, whether it's what are the popular things now, like birthright citizenship or the Karen Reed trial that just ended. Everyone has to have a hot take and go on it. What I wanted to ask you guys was, what is something with the legal system that concerns you that's not getting the hot takes, that's not the headline kind of grabbing stuff? Like what's something maybe under the radar that you guys think about that's important?
Well, I mean, Alice has already touched on it, but I'm going to say it anyways because I think it's worth reiterating. Mental health is a huge issue that we, for whatever reason, don't address in this country. And I think people don't appreciate how much of the things you don't like are driven by mental health. So,
Sure.
whatever it is, whether it's crime or, the homeless problem or whatever, drug issues, whatever it is that you think, man, you see so much of this in the streets these days. Well, one of the reasons is because there are a lot of people who have untreated mental illness, and many of those people are funneled through the criminal justice system, and the criminal justice system is poorly equipped to deal with those folks. And they don't get rehabilitated. They basically get warehoused until their sentence is done, and then they get put back on the street. And I don't have the answers. I'm not a politician. I don't have the answers to how to address it, but it's one of those things that I think we have to grapple with as a society. And until we do that, a lot of the other issues that we see are never going to go away because that is the underlying issue. And it's something that has been poorly addressed for probably the entirety of our species, frankly, but certainly in recent decades.
Sure.
And I'll go with law enforcement. So whatever you think about law enforcement, there is certainly, a lot of people, especially in recent years, who say that there's police conspiracies or, the police are all corrupt or whatever it is. The reality is we need law enforcement because those, especially in criminal cases, they're the ones who investigate. And it is an imperfect system, but honestly, we have studied and we have looked at cases all around the world. This is a pretty darn good system. It is not perfect because it is with humans, but because it's run by humans and it requires judgment, we need good people in these positions. We need good law enforcement officers. We need good prosecutors. We need good defense attorneys. And there are people who want to be lawyers. Law schools are getting more applicants than they ever need. So we don't necessarily need more lawyers. We need good lawyers, of course, but law enforcement officers all across the country are losing police officers because it's a very dangerous job. They're not getting the support of whether the people in the community, because if they're viewed a certain way, then they can't actually do their jobs. And that's a scary place to be because when there is a vacuum, something else will overtake it. No matter what side you fall on the side of law enforcement, if your loved one is murdered, someone needs to investigate it. Someone that needs to arrive at the crime scene and cordon it off. That's going to be a first responder. And we need more good people to be in those positions. So that is something that, we just feel very viscerally because I will tell you, cases that are very close to my heart that I've already talked about, child exploitation cases. I think I speak for all of us, most of us at least, that we're all in favor of making sure that doesn't happen. A really scary fact, child exploitation cases are very time intensive to investigate. We don't even come near to getting to the tip of the iceberg of investigating and prosecuting child exploitation cases in this country because we don't have the law enforcement officers to do it. That's the reality, and we can't even begin to talk about a lot bigger questions when, we are so strapped for resources in that sense. So I guess that's my cry for, I don't know, say thank you to the law enforcement officers you see out there, but also we need good people to go into these professions. If you think there's a problem with it, I find this very disturbing. People just say tear it all down, whether it's the justice system, whether it's the criminal, courtroom, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's prosecutors, whether it's defense attorneys. Okay, tear it down, but then replace it with what? Right? You have to come with a solution, because if you tear it down, then there will just be nothing there. There will be no justice at all. And so one of the things you actually could do is to join it and make sure it's good people who are investigating, who don't have tunnel vision, who are making sure to ask the right questions and, get to justice.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you so much for that. It's funny, I was talking a slightly different venue, but same kind of concept as on the show, is that at some point it got very popular to be the kind of the secular vision of life, right? The materialist, just everything's what we can do. And I forget the gentleman I was talking to on the show, but I was like, it's like we disposed God, but it was like, oh, God's dead, but there's no new king, right? The king is dead, long live the king. There's nothing that filled that meaning in, right? And now there's a huge upwave of people going back to different religions. I think Christianity I think China is now the biggest Christian nation in the world. I was just reading the other day, as people look for meaning. But it's so easy to tear something down without thinking what replaces it. Defund the police. Well, what are you doing instead? It's nice to think it'll all be social workers, but human nature is not so perfect just to think we can just social worker our way out of everything. So thank you so much for that, and thank you guys so much for coming on. It was a real thrill. You're super gracious. Thanks so much for spending your time. I know I think Brett, you said you were a new parent. I think Alice, last time I listened, you were a fairly new parent as well. So thanks so much, guys, for your time. It was lovely. If people want to learn more, I definitely have the prosecutor's website, podcast website linked up. Brad, I can link I know you have a different book site, I believe I had found on there as well, so I can link those up. Where else would you send anyone that wants to learn more about either of you and the podcast in general?
Yeah, just come listen. If you like the storytelling of cases, that's the Prosecutors podcast. We also have kind of a true crime news where we break down, Supreme Court opinions or things happening in your favorite cases in legal briefs with the prosecutors. And we love talking about the law and true crime. So come join us.
And I'm looking forward to getting out of California. I got to visit you. I have to sit at this bar and
you do. It is an open invitation. So you guys are ever out this way, you definitely let me know. I'm happy. You guys come over. We can sit at the bar. We'll go to the Queen Mary, which is just shoot up the 605 for about a half hour. Everything in LA is a half hour or 3 hours. So I can't say how much shooting we'll be doing or crawling, depending on the hour of day. But yeah, for sure. If you guys are out this way, you definitely let me know. So I'll link all that up. And thanks again. I think I have something. Oh, I have something here to cheers you both with. So thanks so much.
Cheers.
Extra shot. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. If you want to learn more about the prosecutors, their link will be in the description and the pinned comment. And of course, if you want to check out my rock and roll satire, Pirates of Appalachia, head over to Substack. That link will be there for you too. This week, we're on chapter 15, The Bastard of Duty. We're with the Zeodarm. It's kind of a quieter moment. You get to learn more about the family structure, some of their mythology, as they head into kind of Civil War land. They're going to their bitter rival, their ancient rival, and they've just crossed over the River Time. And there's a moment of just kind of quiet reflection and anticipation. So check it out. I'd love to see you there. Love always seeing you here. Thanks again, and cheers, everybody.